You're listening to episode 27 of the On Being Human podcast.
Welcome to the On Being Human podcast, where we believe transforming ourselves can positively transform society. Your host, Brandy Fleck, has the honor of exploring the human condition with real people who bravely share their personal stories of adversity, healing, joy, and more. If you're seeking empowerment, strength, and inspiration, listen in to engage and explore tough topics that help us humanize one another, understand ourselves better, spread love, and connect.
Welcome back to another soul-exposing exploration of what it means to be human. Last week, just in time for Teacher Appreciation Week, we talked to a former high school science teacher who left the education system despite his love for education. This week, we're hearing from Renee Cox, another teacher who loves what she does, but she specializes in early childhood education, having taught preschool for 20 years. Renee primarily works with 4- and 5-year-olds. Today, Renee details her journey to becoming a teacher, her approach with young ones, and how important early childhood is because the events that happen at ages 0 through 5 have a lasting, ingrained impact well into adulthood. The magnitude of the importance of preschool teachers is really put into perspective when you think about how that foundation can change the course of our lives. The teachers like Renee, who our kids are with every day, come in contact with kids who have been through trauma and other life-changing events during that malleable time of intense brain development. Tune in to hear about how Renee feels about that responsibility. Renee opens up about how kindness is a priority in her classroom, how she teaches kindness along with a regular curriculum, and her approach to supporting families. And to support our efforts, you can now go to onbeinghumanpodcast.com/shop and click the Amazon banner there to do your regular shopping. At no additional charge to you, a portion of all your purchases made through that click will go directly to the production of this podcast. How easy is that? Same Amazon, same experience, same shopping you do anyways. Best of all, same prices, but you're supporting the On Being Human podcast. Again, shop Amazon at no additional cost to you at onbeinghumanpodcast.com/shop. As always, subscribe on iTunes and Apple Podcasts, leave a rating, leave a review, and you can find the show's presence on Facebook and Pinterest for now. Without further ado, let's hear from Renee. Hi, Renee. Welcome to the show today. I am so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
That's awesome. How are you doing today? What's been going on?
Doing well. Just working really hard this week and looking forward to some vacation time soon.
Well, I was going to say, where are you going on vacation? You might not want that on the show.
Right? No, that's okay.
So let's start with, what does being human mean to you?
Now, being human, I think it's about a lot of imperfections, really. When it comes right down to it, it's mostly about being perfectly imperfect. Reaching for your goals in life. We're the only creatures that are allowed to talk. And just kind of reaching for your goals in life and maybe getting to it or not getting to it. And that's what I love about it.
Okay. So can you tell us what you do for a living, just to give listeners some context, sort of what you do day in and day out, and how long you've been doing it?
Well, I am a teacher, a preschool teacher, early childhood education, and I teach children every single day, Monday through Friday. Well, not every single day. Saturdays and Sundays I'm off, but I do a lot of work on the weekends as well, just to kind of provide them some things when I get back on Monday. I've been doing this for over 20 years, so a long time.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I'm so interested in your experience, and I know that a lot of expertise has probably come from that experience. So how does what happens to us during those early years inform our behavior and relating to the world as adults?
You know, that's a really interesting question. And I have actually learned a lot over the 20 years that I've been doing this. And a lot of the research shows that all the things that happen to us in adulthood are developed from 0 to 5. So those first 5 years are very important to what we end up being as adults. Thinking about that blows my mind because that makes my job super duper important because these kids are so malleable in these early years that actually what I do and what I say and what I teach them could really change how they are as an adult.
Yeah. So how does that information impact what you do in the classroom?
Well, it's actually really, really kind of scary.
Yeah.
I really want to always make sure that I'm saying what I mean and mean what I say. You know, really teach them how to be human. Really teach them how important it is to be kind to people. I always tell the parents that, you know, everyone worries about their kids learning how to count to 3, learning their ABCs, learning how to write. And nobody really thinks about that you really actually have to learn to be a person. You have to learn to interact with other people. And it doesn't come as naturally as maybe some of those other things do. Children reach a point in their life where it snaps and you understand your ABCs and you understand how to count. And if you can give those things to the children and they you know, it might be something that they just kind of absorb, but the kindness, you have to almost talk to them in a different way about it, how it is to be kind, what it is to be kind. You actually have to be kind to them.
Right.
And I tell the parents all the time, if I can teach them one thing before they go to school, is it to be kind to other people, how to treat other people. It's so important. And actually how to self-regulate too, because even us as adults, we expect children to self-regulate. And even sometimes as adults, we have problems self-regulating. We don't know how to regulate our own emotions, but we expect that out of a 4 or a 5-year-old. And so instead of saying, you know, snap out of it, you know, we need to be able to teach them how to regulate that, how to take a breath, how to take a break, or even how to talk to other people when they do have an upset feeling.
Yeah. Those are all really good points. Thank you for sharing that. Can you tell us real quick, like, what's an example? Like, I feel like some adults don't even know how to be kind. Like, how do you teach somebody to be kind?
Right. Well, you know, we talk a lot about give and take when you're talking to someone. You understand that when you're looking at someone in their face, that they're probably listening to you, not just waiting to say what they want to say. A lot of times you may be talking to an adult and you think they're not hearing what I'm saying at all. They're just waiting until it's their turn.
Right.
So we talk about give and take, and we talk about when there's a conflict in our classroom. When I see the conflict in our classroom, it has been in years past that, you know, they're like, use your words. Well, we give them words. So when there is a conflict and they don't know what to say, then you say, do you know what to say? And most of them they have no idea what to say. So you go and you facilitate it. You have them put their hands on the other person. And then you have them look in the eye, and then you say, are they looking at you? And then you have them say that person's name. Are they looking at you now? And most of the time they say, yes, they're looking at me. So then when they look, then we say, this is what you can say. Now, if someone's upset, someone pushed them, then we say, you can use your big voice, and you can say, I didn't like it when you. I need you too. And I have, as an adult, I've just learned this maybe in the last 5 or 6 years. As an adult, I've been doing this. Even some of my other jobs I've done this, and it's a very simple thing to do, but it works. I tell people all the time, no, just tell them this, and they do it, and then you see the children doing it, and it blows my mind every time. But it's so, so simple. Just a touch, an acknowledgement of someone's feelings, an acknowledgement of your own feelings, and then that talking back and forth. And then when we do have conflict and someone is hurting someone, we never say that it's okay. I have a lot of kids who say, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's not okay. It's not okay for someone to hurt you. Because I know you've probably said that. Other people probably say that. It's not okay for someone to hurt you. We do say, I accept your apology. I also give them the option not to accept somebody's apology if they don't think they want to. Most of the time, when they have that eye connection, when they have that touch, then they accept somebody's apology because then they're connected. So I just feel like I've used that as an adult too now, and it works. I mean, it's such a small thing, but that connection to another human being, that's the very basic of kindness.
Yeah.
Helping each other out, being helpful all the time. I mean, we ask each other, is that helpful or is that hurtful? And if you just keep everything that simple, I mean, they just go right along with it. And I've heard them say, I even ask them questions about, who does this, and I've heard them say, like, oh, my mommy is very helpful to me. So they start using that language.
Yeah.
They start doing those things, and it's very small language that you use with them. Body language has a lot to do with it. And it's amazing to me that they catch on so quick. They catch on sometimes quicker to that than they do with the alphabet, because I think it's because they're so malleable right now from that 0 to 5, that if you have that connection with them, they kind of move towards that. They're like, oh, okay, I'm understanding this. And then they start teaching other people, which is amazing, because when we have new kids who come into the classroom, they start teaching them the same thing. So then they become the teachers. Then they're teaching kindness. And it just kind of goes on. And then they move past me. They go on to school. They teach it to other people. So I just, it's a really easy thing that I think that adults take for granted.
Yeah.
We take it for granted, and it's not something that we should do. But my kids, they catch on to it very, very quickly.
Awesome. Well, there were a ton of good tips and takeaways in that I will definitely have listed in the show notes for our listeners.
Okay.
To give us sort of an educator's perspective on the high points of development, are there certain early childhood education milestones from 0 to 5 that are that are just common, that early childhood educators know about, that parents should know about?
The state of Tennessee and many other states have a standard set out for teachers, and that starts with infants, and it goes all the way through high school, actually. And then we have the ones that are for early childhood education. And basically, it's not age groups. Basically, it just says between the ages of this and that, these are some of the things. So, holding up your head, acknowledging other children. So it goes from each one: walking, taking first steps. Each child is individual, just like when you go to the physician and they're like, you're talking to them and they're saying, hey, are they holding up their head yet? Or are they eating solid foods? Every child is different. So when I get children in my classroom, I teach 4 to 5-year-olds. So what I'm looking for is some of the more fine motor skills.
Okay.
And I'm looking for that we're able to communicate. I'm also looking for maybe recognition of their own letter in their name. A lot of parents are kind of like, oh, hey, they should be able to read now. Some are further ahead. Some are way further ahead. Some know how to read. Some don't know how to read, but it doesn't mean that they're behind. So those standards are kind of wide enough so that we can have children who are able to read and the children who are not able to read to be in the same classroom because they're higher scored in other things.
Gotcha.
So, for instance, a child who may not be able to read yet may have really great fine motor skills, may be able to put Legos together and create something. So these are different kinds of skills, and everybody has like different kinds of learning skills. People who are more visual, people who are more auditory, people who learn kinetically. So those are like the things that we look at when we get a child that comes in our classroom. How do they learn? And so we kind of do the different things in our classroom so that every child has an opportunity to learn at their own pace. When they go on to school, they do some of those same kinds of things. Mostly there they do the Common Core. And basically it sets up the kind of things that they should be knowing. A lot of the basic literature, a lot of the basic math that they should know. And so it's variable, basically. But most teachers know about that. But you can look it up in the state of Tennessee. You can look at DHS, and they have all the standards, and parents can actually print those off.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's learning standards on there.
Okay.
And then there's also STAR standards that most schools in the state of Tennessee are set to, that we all follow and teach in the same way. The state has some of the highest standards set forth as far as like the things that we should be doing in our classroom.
Okay.
Higher than some of the other states.
Gotcha.
Basically, the state of Tennessee has it set out all these standards that we follow. And it's just basically a skeleton for us to say, hey, they should know how to look at a group of 5 and know that that's 5 instead of counting it. I mean, they don't even have to tie their shoe before they go to school. But some kids who have great fine motor skills know how to tie their shoes. Mm-hmm. Even though emotions are set out in there, needs to know how to talk to others, needs to know how to ask for help. Self-help skills, pulling up their own pants, those kinds of things. But those are standards that are set out in that parents can actually look at too. Most centers, most early childhood education centers have that sitting in their front office, and that's required by the state so that families can actually look at that. So if anybody is ever interested, you can just ask, and they will point it out to you.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So these early childhood, or not even necessarily early childhood, but these milestones of development, what happens to our conscious and subconscious minds if some of these development milestones get interrupted, either by trauma or anything else that could interrupt them?
That's a really interesting question, and I actually just did some online training through the state of Tennessee about ACEs, and basically it's about childhood trauma and how that affects us for our whole entire life.
Yeah.
Children are very resilient. There are things that can happen to them in early childhood, but they can kind of bounce back from it. Some of those are like deaths in the family, sickness in the family, and they can bounce back from that. But then some of those other things that they can't bounce back from are, if there is chronic illness in the family, chronic abuse in the family, drug abuse in the family, things like that in early childhood that really affect their brain development. Their brains become different. Their brains do not function as a child who would live in a house who had none of this trauma. So the ACEs is set up as these questions. Have you had this happen to your family? Have you had this happen to your family? And what happens is when there's that change to the brain, it actually affects you into your adulthood, and it affects your children too. It actually changes your physicality, and you can pass it on to your own children. And that blew my mind. I know family members who have lived through some abuses, and it made so much sense that they would pass that down, or that affected them because of this reason, because of the history of their parents.
Right.
And their parents before them. And I just thought, wow. And they have, when we do these trainings, they show brain scans of children who have had these kinds of traumas in their life and in the early years, between that 0 and 5. And it just completely changes how their brain works, completely changes how they react to the world. And I thought, wow, like it made me think differently as a teacher, and how I answer to those kinds of things that happen to my children in my classroom, because I've had children who've had trauma. It is amazing that they are very resilient. They can bounce back from some of those things, but that you could pass that on to your own children. Like, they're not even around yet, but it changes your whole physicality.
Yeah.
And then when you decide to have children, it changes them. So that was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that if it can change your brain, that maybe it's doing something at a DNA or cellular level too.
Yes.
And then, yeah, that all just...
It is. It is. When I was doing the training, it was saying it actually changes your eggs. It changes the sperm. It changes everything physically in you. So it changes the DNA. It was, it blew my mind. I was like, wow, it explains a lot of humans.
Yeah.
It explains how we are, because we do go through traumas. In the past, I also worked in research, and I did some research at one of our local hospitals, and, it was for symptomatic response to stomach aches. And we went through those kind of questionnaires, like, what kind of trauma did you have? And back then, it didn't make much sense to me why we would be asking those kinds of questions. It kind of made sense to me. But now it does. It does. It really does, because, it causes those kinds of things. It can physically change you.
Gotcha.
So I just thought that was really cool.
So you're saying that some physical ailments can be a result of passed down trauma, but also maybe like interacting with the world? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And so if you have kids in your class who are impacted by trauma, is there a way to combat that? Or what can we do as parents and teachers and leaders who love our children, who are our future, to help them get through some of these things?
Right. I wish there was like an easy answer to that. But as a teacher, it is very difficult to find those places to go to. I have read so many books, and every single year I have a little one, there's something different. And I think it's just taking the time. I think it's taking the time as an adult to study up and to learn and to be kind and find out what it is to do. There are so many books out there about trauma that are for teachers that parents can also look at. that I've read so many times when there have been deaths in the family or other things going on in their family, and I don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are tragedies that happen in the world, and sometimes the kid might say something about it. And sometimes you just follow the flow of the child. You follow what they are saying, and you approach it at their pace. It's just like when you're going through trauma and you go through the same things. They go through the same things that we do. They go through the shock. They go through the denial. You sort of help them along with it. Now, if it's severe trauma, there are places that you can contact. Hospitals have places where you can go and talk to people. Those are suggestions that I give families if it is something that is so terrible that I'm seeing this change in the children.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have people that can actually come into our center who we can say, hey, would you come and observe and make sure that we're doing the right thing and saying the right things and helping this family. We also provide, every center should provide, actually, or taught this, that there's a book that families can go if you're hungry, if you are having abuse at the home. So they feel free to say, I need help. And then I say to them, hey, here's a number that you can call. I always feel like I try to make it a safe haven in my classroom, that you're safe here. I always tell them it's my job to keep them safe.
Mm-hmm.
And they know that. And they say that to me all the time. And it makes me want to cry, because that is ultimately my job, is to help them to be kind people and to keep them safe.
Gotcha.
If I do those two things, I've done my job. But I think as a whole, as a human race, that we could probably do a better job of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we get thrown away when we have trauma.
Yeah.
And which is really sad. But, it's not an easy thing to deal with. And I think people don't think about this, but teachers deal with that more than a lot of people do, because we're with the children a lot.
Yeah.
I'm in early childhood education. They leave me, they go to school. It's a lot more that goes on there. Yes, they, those first 5 years, they kind of become, they're malleable. But even when they go into school, they see a lot of things. They go through a lot of things. And so those teachers deal with things too. So, we see a whole lot more, and it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary as a teacher to think, wow, I have a lot of power to help these kids or not help them. So every year I'm reading a book. I think I probably have like 4 or 5 books going at a time. And, people laugh at me, but I'm like, well, I want to know. I want to know what I can do and how I can help this person. Because, sometimes kids get thrown away.
Yeah.
Kids, you say, I don't understand them, and I don't understand what they need. And then they get kicked out of somewhere. And that's really sad for me,
mm-hmm.
that happens. But, sometimes people don't know what to do. And I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person who's like, I have no idea what to do. But I think we could all probably do a better job of it, really.
Gotcha. Well, that was a lot of heavy information. Thank you for sharing that, and that is such an important topic, and I agree we should totally be working on making things better in that regard. Everybody's impacted by some kind of trauma at some point, and we need to deal with it. But let's lighten things up a little bit. And
okay.
Yeah, can you just tell us about, do you think early childhood development and teaching is a calling for you? And how did you know it was a calling?
It was. I came about it in kind of a strange way. You usually ask a kid what they want to be when they grow up. And I wanted to be an art teacher. And I thought, yeah, I want to be a teacher. I always taught when I was at home. I had a younger brother, and he was like my little guinea pig, and I had a chalkboard, and I would write on it, and I would teach him. And he was 4 years younger than me, so I'd always teach him the things that I had learned at school, so he knew before he went to school. So he was always my guinea pig, and that was what I did. And I taught my teddy bears and all the things that you see, all the things that I see the kids doing in my classroom, pretending to be me, that I was pretending to be a teacher. Well, as I got older, it kind of left me for a little while, kind of came back. At one point, I thought, oh, I want to work with animals. I thought, I'll be a marine biologist. Nah, decided not to. I worked with some amazing teachers in high school. I worked with some terrible teachers in middle school. I had some amazing teachers in elementary school, and then I had some terrible elementary school teachers. And a lot of teachers will tell you that they're inspired by teachers who were amazing teachers, and they were also inspired by teachers who were terrible teachers. So you're inspired by saying, I will never be like that.
Yeah.
I will never tell a child, like, no, you can't do that. I will always be like that because that's what I want to do. I read out loud in my class because my third grade teacher always read to us aloud. She always did, and that was my favorite part. And I thought, even if I teach really young children, I think it's so important that they hear the written word, and they love it. And, you know, most parents are like, hey, when are they going to start learning to read? And I'm like, they need to love to be read to first. And I know everybody's probably heard that before, but they need to love hearing it before they even start reading it. And that it just inspired me to be that person. So when I graduated from high school, I had thought about going to art school because I thought, oh, I'll go to art school and I'll be a teacher. Well, that didn't work out for me. I had kind of old school parents. My dad was an engineer, but he got to be an engineer by working his way up through it. He worked his job in the 60s, worked his way through school, worked his way up. So he was kind of like, hey, this is what you need to do. So I said, okay, Pops, that's what we'll do. So I just kind of worked my way through it. I got a job here and I learned that. And I got a job here and I learned that. I started in early childhood education, and then I got a job at a hospital where I learned about early childhood sickness. So I learned from that. I kind of fell into that. I learned from that, and I worked there 5 years. So I learned a lot about kids and their brains and how they work and trauma. And it was something that just kind of added on to me. And for a long time, I thought, oh, poor me. I didn't get to go to college. But I was learning so much more than some of my colleagues were learning who actually went to college. So when people come into my classroom now, they're like, wow, how did you know that? And I'm like, well, my dad made me work my way up. Like, so I did eventually do some classwork in early childhood education to earn my CDA. So working on that, but I just worked my way through it. And I think that grit of working through it and working up to it has taught me so much about kids and families, that I have been around them and been exposed to them. And I've had teachers come in who have been in elementary school, and they decided, I want to go into early childhood education. And they come in and they look like a deer in the headlights because they're standing in my classroom and they're like, I don't understand what's going on here. But it's like, it's something that's inside me that I just know.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that this is what I need to say to this child who's having this problem. Do I know everything all the time? No, absolutely not. I don't. But I have all this under my belt, and it's not something that I could have just gotten in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely no way. And I have had so many people who have come through my classroom, other teachers, who say, I've learned so much from you. And I'm like, great, I'm so glad you learned from me. Like, maybe I can learn something from you. But I try to learn something from other people too. But I do think it's my calling. I think of everything, my calling is just to help other people. All of the things that I've ever done, I even actually worked, I did like a physical therapy and chiropractic care
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. For just a couple of years, I stepped away from taking care of kids, and I thought, hey, I'll do something different. But I was still taking care of people, still taking that burden off of people, because I kind of feel like that's what happens when my kids come into me in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I say good morning, and they give me a hug. And some kids are having trouble coming in the morning. Some are not. Some just ease on in. But I think that I do the same thing as a nurse would do, where you take that ease off of people.
Mm-hmm.
And as a therapist would do, you take that ease off of people. So I kind of become the catch-all in the classroom.
Gotcha.
The person who is your therapist, the person who is it. But it's amazing to me that I can do those things, and that I came to that point after kind of working through all those things. Would I still like to work with animals? Sure. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I work with amazing kids every day, and they teach me every day, teach me something different. And, on the daily, they'll say, hey, I learned this today. And I'm like, it just blows me away. I can imagine doing anything else.
Well, that's awesome. That's very cool. So what is the most important thing to you? You may have alluded to it a little bit when we were talking about your calling.
Right.
But how do you approach life, and what's the most important thing?
So, my dad just passed away, and I told everybody, he left us with a great spiritual legacy. My faith is really strong, and it has brought me through a lot. And I feel like teaching people is important. I mean, teaching people how to love, teaching people how to be kind, and that's what's important to me. That and my family and my friends, but it's super important.
Gotcha. Well, can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like growing up?
Kind of crazy.
Okay.
It was fun. I actually didn't attend school. I didn't go to preschool. Nowadays it's kind of the norm. And my mom and dad got married in 1960, had my brother and sister right away, and then they had me 14 years later. I was a surprise. And so I was born in 79. And so I'm an 80s baby. So totally different time then.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of outside time, a lot of family time. We always ate together in the evening, same time every day. My siblings, we always laughed because when we asked my mom what time to come over, we know it's 5:30, 5 or 5:30.
Yeah.
It's always the same. We always sit and eat together. It was a wonderful childhood. I had an amazing childhood. I had a loving mom and a loving dad. My mom stayed home with us every day. Did she fuss at us? Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Did my dad fuss at us? Yes, he did. I can count probably on one hand how many times I got like in real big trouble. They were really understanding parents, but also strict. They were strict parents, but we got to do some amazing things. We just went through pictures, since Dad passed, and we got to go to California, and it was we flew out west and then we drove. And, there's not very many people who get to do that kind of thing. And I just think back on it fondly because it was a good time. And I think sometimes I use that in my classroom, talking about the kids love when we're sitting at the table because, we can't, especially when they're eating, we can't look away or anything like that. So I'll tell stories, and sometimes I'll tell stories about when I was little. They love it. They're always like, tell us a story about when you were little. And so I'll tell them the story about the time that my brother went missing and I cried. We were in downtown Nashville and we were at an event and he turned around and he was gone.
Oh, no.
And so he was little and I was terrified. My mom was terrified. And we found him at Lost and Found, and they think that's hilarious. They giggle and laugh, but then we start talking about what's the importance of staying with your family and being safe. But they love those stories, and I love telling those stories because those are the stories that my family always told me, my dad always told me, and my mom always told me. And when my grandma used to come over, she would always tell me the same stories. And when she was alive, I used to kind of be like, oh, okay, Grandma, okay. I've heard that story before, but it's that oral history that has for generations gone on. When we tell tall tales or something like that to the kids in the classroom, then I think of my grandma now, and I tell the kids the stories. My grandma's name was Itwa, but her name here in the South was Etol.
Oh, no.
And so one of the little boys accidentally called her toilet one time, and the kids think that is the funniest story ever.
Oh.
But I remember hearing that story over and over and over again from my grandma and kind of rolling my eyes and being like, okay, Grandma, that's a funny story. Mm-hmm. But now I appreciate it so much more. And the kids think it's funny, too. They appreciate it. So just my life growing up, I cannot say that there was ever a time that I just was a miserable person.
Yeah.
Ever. Yeah. It was a blessed upbringing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Renee. That's really awesome. And so do you think those experiences molded you into the adult you are today?
Oh, most definitely. I think so, for sure. Even, and just as a side note, I think sometimes when people grow up in families that are like, oh, my family was that atomic family and we had this and we had that, and then they kind of don't understand other families. Mm-hmm. The coolest thing about my family is that we were around other families who did have traumas, who did have things going on. So it was easier for me when I grew up and had been around different kinds of families to understand other people. And I think that's important too, to have your kids know other people outside their family, to know that there are different kinds of families. And that's really what we teach in our classrooms. But it has molded me as an adult today. I think I'm more understanding because my family was understanding.
Gotcha.
My dad was always a very understanding person. My mom's always been sort of understanding. Sometimes she's like, well, I don't understand that. but mostly understanding.
Gotcha.
Right.
So one last question for you, and that is sort of related to identity. And so your family growing up and all these early childhood experiences and all of our experiences really inform who we are. And we've talked a lot about your job. So how does your job play into your identity along with all that other stuff? And then should it?
I think it does. I think, I see that it carries over into my life at home. It's hard to turn it off. I'm a teacher at heart, so it kind of carries into when I'm out with people and their kids are with us. I personally don't have children, I have chosen not to have children, but I think it's an amazing privilege. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I've chosen not to. I think it carried on for me, and that's my personal choice. But I think it's like one of those things where it is a heavy thing to have kids. Mm-hmm. And that's just my personal belief about it. And I think that had carried on for me. And when we go out with our friends and they have kids, I always talk to the kids. I talk to the kids, you know, you talk to the adults too, but I talk to the children, how are you doing? And what are you, you know, and they know that I am, everybody calls me Nene. Mm-hmm. So they know I'm Nene, and they know that I'm a teacher. And sometimes they don't know at first, and then I tell them, oh, I teach, and then they're like, oh, you're a teacher, like, and that's, oh, and so then they start talking to me about it. But really, it has become what I am. Like, you know, my husband's like, oh, she's a teacher, and it becomes you, and it kind of engulfs you. And even when I wasn't teaching, I felt like I was still a teacher.
Yeah.
Because you might not be, that might not be your quote unquote job, but you still do it. And I think everybody is a teacher. You know, if you look at yourself and you're a parent, you're their first teacher. Mm-hmm. You're the first one that gets to influence your child. So everybody's a teacher. I start seeing the teachers in everybody. You know, everybody's good at something and knows how to do something. So I think just as a basic human race, everyone is capable of teaching someone something.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure. That's a really interesting perspective, and I'm super glad you shared it with us. And Renee, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure here too.
You guys, isn't Renee just so awesome? She is just so sweet, caring, and is so great with kids. Let's support our early childhood educators like Renee so that our future remains bright. And for all the cool stuff Renee mentions, go to onbeinghumanpodcast.com/episodes/027. Be sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts so others like yourselves can find the show and so we can continue to grow and serve you with valuable content and new heart-based offerings in the future. Plus, I would love to highlight your review on a podcast episode so you get a shout out for listening. And sign up to join in this conversation with me at onbeinghumanpodcast.com. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in weekly at onbeinghumanpodcast.com for more soul-exposing explorations of what it means to be human. Until next week, love to you all.